But let's go ahead and dive into the show with this. Occasionally, we'll mention the names of some pretty big investment firms like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Bridgewater. That's another one. And his CEO was talking recently about picking investments. He said they've got 400 people working on picking the investments day and night, and they still get it wrong like 40% of the time. Look, here's the thing. If you're trying to pick stocks in retirement, can you afford to be wrong 40% of the time? Can you do retirement planning where it's not actually a guessing game?
That's a great question, and I'm glad Connor's here with me because he's going to kind of take this one here for us and explain a little bit about what they mean. But when I look at this, and I think of being wrong 40% of the time, if you look at Major League Baseball, I'm a big baseball fan. If you look at Major League Baseball, some of the best hitters ever to play the game are wrong 7 out of 10 times. Or I mean, they're wrong 7 out of 10 times. They bat 300 is a really really good batting average. In Major League Baseball, maybe 330, 340, something like that is phenomenal, right? And they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars being wrong 7 out of 10 times. And when I look at this, the question is very simply this: what can you afford? Can you afford to be wrong? Um, you know, 4 out of 10 times. I know selling Medicare, if I'm wrong 4 out of 10 times, if I advise my clients to go with the wrong plan, it can blow up their portfolios. And if I'm wrong 4 out of 10 times, I'm going to have four really cranked off clients. And quite frankly, I don't want that. How does this play into what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, Connor, and helping people understand that maybe being wrong 4 out of 10 times isn't a horrible thing when it comes to investments? We don't want to be wrong at all, but sometimes you just can't help it.
Yeah, I think it really puts into perspective how difficult it can really be to accurately pick investments when one of the largest hedge funds, maybe the largest hedge fund in the world, they still get it wrong 40% of the time. They have access to PhDs, chartered financial analysts, anyone in finance. They want to work at Bridgewater, and still, this is what they get. They get 40% of it wrong every time. So I think one of the most important things that this boils down to is it's really important to understand the rationale behind your overall financial plan as well as your investments more specifically that you own. So something that we like to ask our potential new clients when we first meet with them is, what is the rationale behind your current investment portfolio? And when we ask that question, about three-fourths of the time, they stare blankly at
Well,
us.
they get the glazed over eyes,
Yeah,
like,
they get a little bit worried when you ask that question.
sure.
So I think that's something that's really important to communicate to them. So for example, one of our strategies that has done very well this year and just really well in general, it really tries to identify quality stocks. So this is just an example to explain why you own what you own, but this is a quality portfolio. So something that we emphasize and we really communicate to our clients is we want to own companies that are cash rich, they have low debt relative to their size, they earn high returns on equity, and those are three things that we communicate and that we emphasize, but there's also other stuff on top of that. But just to give you an idea.
I know when I meet with clients, I always do the hand over the head, vroom, this is over my head stuff,
Yeah.
right? Because it is. I like to stay in my lane, but I listen to you guys, and I can eavesdrop on some of the appointments because I learned by all of this. And one of the things that makes things really crystal clear to me is how Nolan explains that. If you look at back when the market was bad, when COVID hit, there was a lot of companies that went belly up. I mean, these companies that were really debt heavy, didn't have a lot of cash in their portfolios, those companies aren't around, or they were gobbled up by some of these other, cash rich. These are things that just make
Exactly.
sense to me, right? I mean, you can afford to have the ebb and flows of the roller coaster ride, so to speak. And if you've got a lot of cash, not a lot of debt on the books, you can sustain that. And that just makes sense to me. And, when I hear Nolan talk about that, and kind of like what you just said here, those things make sense. And I think the common layperson out there like myself that doesn't do this for a living, making sense and making it simplified for us is super, super important. And that's what you just did. Are there any other things that you would advise or help explain for people saying is 40% acceptable?
Well, I don't think we really look at it that way. I don't think about when we're creating our portfolios and managing them. Well, we need at least, we need 60% of them at least to be winners. We really just we stick to our methodology. We define our rules for ourselves so we can stay in our own lane. And
Sure.
that's important for our investment team, and it's also important when we communicate it to our clients. Because like you said, during COVID or during 2022 when the market was down 20%, when things get tough, that's when you're going to want to sell. Everyone's
Right.
selling, the market's down. That if you own the right stocks and you're confident in your strategy, that could be a really good long-term opportunity. So that's why it's so important to understand what you own, see if you should still own it, and potentially buy the dip if it's a good opportunity. That's why it's important to trust your conviction.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like Nolan always says, the worst thing you can do if you're is react on emotion. A recipe for disaster is to sell when the market's down and then try to get back in when the market's up. I mean, that's just a long term. That is a recipe for a failure.
It's a losing
So,
strategy for sure.
yeah, there's no question. And we want to make sure that we eliminate those losing strategies. So I guess, one thing when I look at this, it's like not so much um, is 40% a bad number because of the strategies you mentioned, but diversifying and looking at different buckets of money, like the independent income system that Nolan talks about all the time. I guess it's a question of how aggressive do you want to be? Where do you see your portfolio working for you moving through retirement, and how can we help you get there? So that's great information, Connor. Thank you very much. And at this point, I guess it's a matter of setting your tolerance and threshold, and coming in and meeting with the guys here, and to get a real good idea on how it works, and what you actually have in your portfolio.
Scott, you mentioned baseball at the start of this question, and it is true. The people with the all-time home run leaders, guess what? They've also got a lot of strikeouts because
Yes.
you don't get it right all the time. Home runs, they're fantastic. Everyone wants that hot stock. They want to be able to say that they got it right. But what wins games is singles and doubles. That consistency is key. And longtime listeners of the show will know that what Connor said with the investment methodology is the same thing that all the way up top, the same thing that Nolan talks about, the same thing Chaz has talked about. What they look for when they're picking stocks, when they're investing. That consistent message means that it's not going to get different conversations with these guys every time you talk to them. You talk to one or the other. That consistent message is what is done well for the team at America's Retirement Headquarters, the Retirement Guys Formula. And if you want to find out more, if you want to have that consistency in your retirement plan, it's as simple as reaching out and giving a call, 419-794-3030. Once again, that number, 419-794-3030. Or you can schedule a time online, find out more about the team. And like I said earlier, check out Connor, find out more about everybody out there, arhq.com.